I should have seen it coming. The signs were everywhere, like breadcrumbs leading to an inevitable conclusion. The way Martin would interrupt me in meetings, how the invitations to client dinners gradually stopped appearing in my inbox, the subtle shift in how colleagues interacted with me, a little more careful, a little more distant. But when you've dedicated 15 years of your life to a company, you develop a certain blindness, a faith that loyalty matters. That experience counts for something. I was wrong. It was a Tuesday afternoon when my world collapsed. Not with a dramatic confrontation or a formal meeting, nothing so dignified. Instead, it was an email never meant for my eyes that shattered everything I thought I knew about my place at Westfield Financial Partners. I'd been working on the Richardson portfolio, a significant client I'd personally brought in 7 years ago. Howard Richardson trusted me implicitly with his family's considerable wealth, and I'd navigated them through market crashes, recessions, and even a messy divorce that threatened to halve their assets. I knew their financial situation better than my own some days. So when I noticed that Martin had scheduled a meeting with the Richardsons without copying me, something felt off. Not alarming yet, just unusual enough to notice. "Hey, Sandra." I called across to our department assistant. "Was there a mix-up with the Richardson meeting on Thursday?" I wasn't copied on Martin's invitation. She looked up, that flash of discomfort crossing her face before she could hide it. "Oh, I think Martin wanted to introduce them to Aiden. You know, get some fresh perspective." Aiden, 29 years old, MBA from Wharton certainly, but with barely 18 months at our firm. The golden boy Martin had been parading around to our top clients lately. "Right," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Makes sense to bring new talent into the fold. But I should probably be there too, given my history with the account." "I'll check with Martin," she said, already turning back to her screen. I returned to my office, a knot forming in my stomach. I'd been feeling increasingly sidelined over the past few months. Projects I would typically lead were being handed to younger team members. My advice in strategy meetings, once sought after, now seemed to fall on deaf ears. At 53, I wasn't ancient in the financial world, but I'd noticed the subtle shift in dynamics as our firm pursued a more dynamic image. I tried to focus on the Waterman proposal, but my mind kept drifting back to the Richardson meeting. Why hadn't Martin included me? After 15 minutes of staring at the same spreadsheet, I decided to email him directly. "Martin, noticed the Richardson meeting Thursday. Planning to attend as their primary advisor. Let me know if you need anything specific prepared." Richard, short, professional, leaving no room for misinterpretation. I hit send and returned to my work, the knot in my stomach slowly dissolving. Perhaps it had been an oversight. Martin had been distracted lately with the firm's expansion plans. His response came 19 minutes later. I know because I checked the timestamp repeatedly afterward, trying to understand if he'd carefully crafted his dismissal or if it had been a casual afterthought. "Richard, I've got this one covered with Aiden. Want to bring a fresh approach to the Richardsons? We can debrief you after." The knot returned tighter now. This wasn't an oversight. This was deliberate exclusion from my own client relationship. I started typing several responses, deleting each one as my frustration mounted. Before I could decide on a final version, another email appeared in my inbox. From Martin Westfield to Aiden Davis. Subject, Richardson Strategy. Forwarded to you by Sandra Winters. My stomach dropped as I realized Sandra had accidentally included me in an email chain I was never meant to see. A primal instinct told me to stop reading, to protect myself from whatever was coming, but my eyes were already scanning the contents. "Aiden, this is a critical transition. The Richardsons represent $18 million in assets, and Richard has been their advisor for years. We need to execute this handover carefully. If Thursday goes well, we'll move forward with the other clients on the transition list. The board is fully supportive of our strategy to refresh our client-facing team with younger talent. Richard's been valuable, but clients these days respond better to advisors who reflect current market dynamics and innovation. We've got at least 8 other major accounts to transition away from him before the restructuring announcement next quarter. Let's discuss approach tomorrow." Martin. The world seemed to blur around the edges as I read it once, twice, 3 times. Transition list. Refresh with younger talent. Restructuring announcement. The clinical language couldn't disguise the truth. I was being systematically pushed out of the firm I'd helped build. My clients, relationships I'd cultivated for years, people whose children's graduations I'd attended, whose financial fears I'd soothed during sleepless nights, were being handed off to someone half my age because I no longer fit the image Martin wanted to project. The worst part wasn't even the betrayal. It was the cowardice. The fact that no one, not Martin, not the board members I'd considered friends, not even Sandra, who'd worked alongside me for a decade, had the decency to have an honest conversation with me. My phone buzzed. A text from Howard Richardson. Richard, looking forward to seeing you at Thursday's meeting. Have some thoughts about that tech opportunity we discussed. My hand trembled slightly as I set the phone down without responding. Howard had no idea I wouldn't be there, that I was being erased. I closed my office door, something I rarely did, and sank into my chair. 15 years. More than a third of my professional life dedicated to Westfield. I'd postponed vacations when clients needed me, missed my daughter's piano recital to handle the Wilson emergency, stood by Martin when his divorce nearly derailed a major acquisition. And this was how it ended. Not with a gold watch and retirement party, but with a secret transition list. And the word older hanging unspoken but unmistakable between the lines. The initial shock gave way to something colder, darker. A calculation began forming in my mind. Not yet a plan, but the shadows of one. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out the leather portfolio Emily had given me for our anniversary last year. For the next chapter, she'd written inside the cover, assuming I'd use it to plan our long-delayed trip to Tuscany. Instead, I wrote a single heading on the first blank page, Next Steps. I'd always been methodical. It's what made me an excellent financial advisor. Even in crisis, my mind worked in organized patterns. As the afternoon light slanted through my office blinds, I began making lists. Clients I had personal relationships with, industry contacts I'd maintained over decades, resources at my immediate disposal. By 5 o'clock, when the office began emptying, I had filled 3 pages. Not yet a strategy, but an inventory of possibilities. I slipped the portfolio into my briefcase, straightened my desk, and walked out with the same polite nod to colleagues I offered every evening. Good night, Richard. Sandra called, unable to meet my eyes. She knew what she'd done, accidentally showing me the truth. Good night, Sandra, I replied, calm and measured. See you tomorrow. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me crumble. Not yet. Not ever. The drive home that evening exists in my memory as a blur of traffic lights and talk radio. I remember gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, but my mind was elsewhere, calculating, planning, imagining scenarios that grew darker with each passing mile. Our house, the 4-bedroom colonial Emily and I had purchased when Westfield made me partner, was dark when I arrived. Tuesday was Emily's book club night. I was grateful for the emptiness, for the chance to process without explaining why I looked like I'd seen a ghost. I poured 3 fingers of the Macallan 18 I saved for special occasions, stood in our kitchen, and drained it in one burning swallow. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I cried. Not delicate tears, but harsh, ugly sobs that bent me double over the granite countertop. 15 years of dedication reduced to a problem to be managed. A liability because of birthdays I couldn't control. When the storm passed, I washed my face, poured another drink, smaller this time, and carried it to my home office. I booted up my personal laptop, never the company machine. I wasn't that careless, and began researching what I already suspected. Age discrimination is notoriously difficult to prove. Companies like Westfield are sophisticated enough to disguise it behind performance metrics, cultural fit, assessments, and restructuring initiatives. They create paper trails justifying decisions long before they make them. A partner at a law firm I'd helped through a nasty divorce had once told me, by the time most people realize they're being pushed out for their age, the company has a 6-month head start on covering their tracks. He was right. Martin would have documentation ready, perhaps slightly declining performance reviews over the past year, reviews he himself had written, notes about clients requesting fresh perspectives, and careful HR language that never explicitly mentioned age, but established a narrative that would stand up to scrutiny. I could fight it. Hire a lawyer, file a discrimination claim, drag everyone through depositions and discovery. Best case scenario, a settlement that would cover a few years' salary in exchange for signing an NDA that would effectively end my financial career. Martin hadn't just attacked my job, he'd attacked my dignity, my legacy, my sense of self-worth. This required something more permanent than a legal settlement, something that would make him understand exactly what he was throwing away. I heard Emily's car in the driveway and quickly closed the browser tabs. I wasn't ready to share this with her, not until I had more than raw pain and half-formed revenge fantasies to offer. Richard? She called, the front door closing behind her. "You're home early." I took a breath, put on the face I'd perfected in client meetings during market downturns, concerned but confident, and went to greet my wife. "Just wrapped up the Waterman proposal ahead of schedule," I said, kissing her cheek. "How was book club?" "Gloria still hasn't read past chapter 3. She laughed, setting down her purse. "But the Chardonnay was excellent." She paused, studying my face. After 26 years of marriage, Emily could read my expressions like market reports. "Everything okay?" "Just tired," I said, the first of what would become many lies in the coming months. "Thinking about taking a personal day soon. Maybe that Friday golf you've been pushing me toward." She brightened, clearly pleased by this uncharacteristic interest in work-life balance. "That sounds wonderful. The Richardson meeting is Thursday, right? Perfect timing for a long weekend after." "The Richardson meeting?" My chest tightened, but I maintained my expression. "We'll see how the week goes. How about pasta for dinner?" That night, lying beside Emily's sleeping form, I stared at the ceiling and let the machinery of my mind work. I'd spent decades helping wealthy clients protect and grow their assets. I understood money flows, client psychology, and the intricacies of relationship management in the financial world. These weren't just professional skills. They were weapons I could wield with surgical precision if properly deployed. The question wasn't whether I could hurt Martin and Westfield. I knew exactly how to do that. The question was what I wanted to emerge from the wreckage. Revenge alone would be hollow if I destroyed myself in the process. By morning, the first contours of a plan had taken shape. Not revenge exactly, something more elegant. A response that would deliver justice while giving me a new beginning. Martin thought I was too old, too expensive, too outdated for Westfield's image. I would show him and everyone else exactly what experience was worth. I dressed with particular care that Wednesday morning. My best charcoal suit, the hand-stitched Italian shoes I reserved for meeting new clients, my father's vintage Omega watch. Armor in its way. "Special meeting today?" Emily asked, eyebrow raised as she poured coffee. "Just feeling sharp," I replied with a smile that felt foreign on my face. Sometimes you need to remind people who you are. The office hummed with the usual morning energy when I arrived. Analysts huddled over reports, the Bloomberg terminal displaying market movements, the smell of expensive coffee permeating everything. I nodded to colleagues, exchanged pleasantries with the reception team, and locked myself in my office with instructions not to be disturbed until my 10 a.m. with the Petrosky account. Then I did something I'd never done in 15 years at Westfield. I began documenting everything. Client contact information, not just the formal data in the CRM system, but the personal details that made relationships work. Howard Richardson's passion for early American furniture. Patricia Lebowitz's rescue greyhounds. The anniversary dates for the McKinley account and why their asset allocation aligned with their son's college graduation timeline. These were the details that transformed a financial advisor from a service provider to a trusted confidant. Details I'd kept primarily in my head, supplemented by the personal note system I'd developed over the years. Details that weren't company property. Next, I created a document outlining my contributions to the firm. New assets brought in, client retention rates, revenue generated, special projects that had established Westfield's reputation in particular sectors. All information I could substantiate with documentation, all evidence of my value that would stand in stark contrast to whatever narrative Martin was building. By the time Sandra knocked for my Petrosky meeting, I had filled a secure cloud storage account with information I hoped I wouldn't need, but was determined to have available. The day proceeded with excruciating normalcy. I advised clients, reviewed portfolios, made recommendations that would safeguard their financial futures. No one looking at me would suspect that beneath my professional demeanor, tectonic plates were shifting. I deliberately avoided Martin, knowing my composure might fracture if forced to engage in small talk with the man who was systematically dismantling my career. Instead, I sent him a brief email in the afternoon. "Martin, we'll need to reschedule our monthly check-in from Friday to next week. Petrosky account requires immediate attention." "Richard." His response came quickly. "No problem. Actually works better for my schedule." Of course it did. He was probably relieved to postpone what would have been an uncomfortable conversation after tomorrow's Richardson meeting, a meeting I still wasn't supposed to know I'd been excluded from. At 4:30, I did something unprecedented. I left early, telling Sandra I needed to prepare for the Petrosky follow-up from home. Her smile seemed genuinely relieved. Perhaps she'd been dreading facing me after her email mistake. Instead of going home, I drove to Riverside Park and sat on a bench overlooking the water. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows as joggers and dog walkers passed by, everyone immersed in their own concerns, oblivious to the man whose professional life was imploding. I pulled out my phone and made a call I'd been contemplating all day. "Richard Caldwell," said a surprised voice on the third ring. "To what do I owe this unexpected pleasure?" Michael Chen had been my closest friend at Westfield before leaving to start his own boutique firm 5 years earlier. Martin had seen his departure as a betrayal. I'd maintained the friendship despite the professional awkwardness. "Got time for a drink, Michael? Something I could use your perspective on." A slight pause. "That's serious, huh? Harper's in 30 minutes. "Perfect. Thank you." Harper's was a wood-paneled establishment, far enough from the financial district to avoid running into Westfield colleagues. Michael was already at a corner table when I arrived, 2 glasses of Lagavulin waiting. "You look like hell," he said instead of a greeting, pushing 1 glass toward me. "Feel worse," I replied, taking a long sip. Michael studied me over his glass. "Last time you called for an emergency drink was when Emily had that cancer scare 6 years ago. So either something's happened with family or Martin's pushing me out," I said flatly. "Age discrimination wrapped in corporate restructuring. They're already transitioning my clients to younger advisors." To his credit, Michael didn't offer platitudes or express disbelief. He simply nodded slowly, as if confirming a suspicion. "How'd you find out?" "Misdirected email. They have a transition list. I'm being systematically removed from client relationships before an official restructuring next quarter." "Bastards," Michael muttered, but not surprising. Martin's been repositioning the firm since that Silicon Valley expansion. All about the young tech money now. He leaned forward. "Wow, what are you thinking? Legal action?" I shook my head. "Too messy, too uncertain. And even if I won, my career there would be effectively over." "So what then? Early retirement? You must have enough saved to—" "I'm thinking of starting my own firm." The words hung between us, the first time I'd articulated the thought aloud. Michael's eyebrows shot up, then he broke into a slow smile. Well, Richard Caldwell, entrepreneur. Can't say I saw that coming." He took another sip. "It's not easy, you know, especially the first couple of years." "I know. That's partly why I wanted to talk to you. You made the leap. Never seemed to regret it." "Best decision I ever made," Michael confirmed. "Terrifying, exhausting, but I've never been happier." He studied me. "But there's something else, isn't there? This isn't just about starting fresh." I hesitated, then decided Michael was perhaps the only person who would truly understand both the professional and emotional dimensions of what I was contemplating. "I want my clients, Michael. Not all of them. I'm not that greedy or naive. But the ones I've truly built relationships with. The ones who trust me, not Westfield's brand." Michael let out a low whistle. "That's a declaration of war, Richard. Those non-compete and non-solicitation agreements Westfield has everyone sign are practically legendary in their restrictiveness." "I've reviewed mine recently," I said carefully. "There are interpretations that provide some flexibility. Martin will come after you with everything he's got. He can't afford to let clients walk without consequences, sets a bad precedent." "I'm counting on it," I said, surprising myself with the cold certainty in my voice. Michael studied me for a long moment, then raised his glass. "To new beginnings, then, and to reminding Martin Westfield that experience isn't something to be discarded. It's something to be feared when it's turned against you." We clinked glasses, and for the first time since reading that email, I felt a strange sense of peace settling over me. Not happiness, that was still far away, but purpose. Direction. "I'll need advice," I admitted. "Logistical, strategic." "You've got it," Michael said without hesitation. "Though I should warn you, there are ethical lines we won't cross. I didn't build my reputation by burning bridges." "I don't want to burn bridges," I clarified. "I want to build a better one and give clients a clear choice about which structure they trust more with their financial futures." Michael laughed. "Always the diplomat, Richard. But we both know this is personal, too. Don't deny yourself that motivation. It'll keep you going when things get tough." He was right, of course. This was deeply, painfully personal. But converting that pain into productive action would require discipline and strategy, not just emotional reaction. We spent the next 2 hours outlining preliminary considerations: office space requirements, technology platforms, compliance structures, capital needs. Michael had walked this path. His insights were invaluable. By the time we parted, night had fallen completely. I felt simultaneously exhausted and energized, like a marathon runner who's hit the wall but caught a second wind. "Call me tomorrow after the Richardson meeting," Michael said as we stood to leave. I'm curious how that plays out, knowing what you know now. I flinched slightly. I'm not invited. That's actually how this started, seeing Martin schedule it without me. Michael's expression darkened. Then you should go anyway. What? Show up. See how Martin handles it. Professional calm, acting like of course you'd be there for your client of 7 years. He shrugged. Best case, you maintain the relationship a little longer. Worst case, you get valuable information about how Martin operates under pressure. Either way, you win. The suggestion was bold, confrontational in a way that wasn't typically my style. But these weren't typical circumstances. I'll think about it, I said. Emily was watching television when I arrived home, a glass of wine on the coffee table beside her. Long day, she asked. Had drinks with Michael Chin after work, I said, loosening my tie. Catching up. Michael? That's nice. How's he doing with his firm? Thriving, actually. Very happy with the decision to go independent. Something in my tone made her look up sharply. Richard, is something happening at work? The moment stretched between us. I could tell her everything now. The email, the betrayal, the embryonic plans for revenge and reinvention. But the words wouldn't come. Not yet. Not until I could present her with more than a wounded ego and half-formed plans. Just the usual pressures, I said finally. Martin's pushing hard on the Silicon Valley expansion. Everyone's feeling the strain. She didn't believe me, not completely, but she let it pass. Come sit. She patted the couch beside her. I recorded that documentary about the financial crisis you wanted to see. I sat beside her, grateful for the respite from decision-making, from planning, from the churning anger that had been my constant companion since yesterday's revelation. For 2 hours, we watched familiar events unfold on screen. A crisis I'd navigated clients through. Decisions I'd made that had preserved fortunes while others crumbled. Evidence, though Emily didn't know it, of exactly what experience was worth in an industry where institutional memory rarely extended beyond the last market cycle. That night, I dreamt of the Richardson meeting. In the dream, I walked into the conference room to find Martin, Aiden, and Howard already seated. There he is, Howard said warmly. We were just talking about you, Richard. But when I tried to speak, no sound came out. Martin smiled coldly as I struggled, while Aiden began explaining investment concepts to Howard as if I weren't there. I woke at 3 a.m., sweating despite the cool bedroom. I slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Emily, and went to my home office. The leather portfolio lay where I'd left it, my hasty notes from yesterday visible in the dim light from my computer monitor. I opened to a fresh page and began writing with new clarity. If I was going to do this, really do this, I needed to be methodical, strategic. This wouldn't be a tantrum, it would be a calculated response. Martin had taught me unwittingly a valuable lesson. Preparation was everything. He'd been planning my obsolescence for months. I would not make the same mistake of underestimating my opponent. By dawn, I had drafted the skeleton of a business plan. Not just an angry reaction to Martin's betrayal, but a genuine vision for what my own firm could be, leveraging my experience while embracing innovation. Understanding client needs on a deeper level than Westfield's increasingly standardized approach allowed. Building something that reflected my values rather than chasing market trends. When Emily found me there at 6 a.m., still in yesterday's shirt and slacks, she didn't ask questions. She simply brought me coffee and kissed the top of my head. Whatever it is, she said quietly, we'll figure it out. I covered her hand with mine, grateful beyond words for her intuitive understanding. Yes, I said, we will. The Richardson meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. As I dressed for work, I still hadn't decided whether to follow Michael's audacious suggestion to simply show up. Part of me recoiled at the potential awkwardness. Another part thrilled at the thought of forcing Martin to reveal his hand prematurely. In the end, a third option presented itself as I was parking at the office. My phone rang, Howard Richardson himself. Richard, glad I caught you. Quick question before our meeting. Did you have a chance to look into that tech fund we discussed last month? The one with the quantitative approach to biotech investments? My heart raced. Howard clearly expected me to be at the meeting. Martin hadn't told him otherwise. I did, Howard, I said, keeping my voice steady. I've prepared a brief analysis. Looking forward to walking you through it this morning. Excellent. Always appreciate your thoroughness. See you at 10. The call ended, and I sat in my car, mind racing through implications and options. Howard assumed I would be there. Martin had deliberately excluded me, but hadn't had the courage to tell the client. This created an opportunity and a choice. I could call Howard back, make some excuse about being pulled into another meeting, effectively doing Martin's dirty work for him. I could confront Martin directly before the meeting, creating a scene that would ultimately harm everyone involved, or I could simply proceed as if nothing were amiss, forcing Martin to either include me or expose his plan in front of a valuable client. The third option was risky, professionally uncomfortable at best, potentially career-ending at worst. But something had shifted in me since reading that email. The careful, conservative financial advisor who had built his reputation on measured risk assessment was giving way to someone with less to lose and more to prove. I entered the building with unusual awareness of my surroundings. The security guard's greeting, the elevator's gentle ascent, colleagues' morning nods. Everything felt slightly unreal, as if I were moving through a familiar landscape that had been subtly altered. Sandra looked up as I approached her desk, alarm briefly crossing her features. "Good morning, Richard." "Morning, Sandra. Could you make sure the Richardson file is in conference room B for the 10 o'clock? And I'll need copies of the biotech analysis I sent you yesterday." She hesitated, glancing toward Martin's office. I think Aiden has prepared materials for that meeting." "Excellent. We can compare notes." Howard just called with specific questions about the biotech fund analysis I've been working on. Without waiting for her response, I continued to my office, closed the door, and took several deep breaths. The first move had been made. No going back now. At 9:55, I gathered my materials and walked calmly to conference room B. Through the glass walls, I could see Martin and Aiden already inside, arranging presentation materials. Martin's back was to the door as I entered. "Good morning," I said pleasantly. Martin spun around, his expression cycling rapidly from surprise to confusion to controlled anger. "Richard, didn't expect to see you here. Howard called this morning with questions about the biotech analysis." I explained, setting my portfolio on the table. "Specifically asked me to bring it. I hope that's not a problem?" The implied question hung in the air. Would Martin admit to the deliberate exclusion? Would he invent some excuse? Or would he accept my presence to avoid awkwardness with the client? Aiden looked between us, clearly sensing the tension but unsure of its source. After what felt like minutes but was likely only seconds, Martin forced a tight smile. "No problem at all. We were going to cover some broader market perspective first, then dive into specific opportunities." Translation: he tried to marginalize my participation, keeping me as a technical resource rather than the relationship lead I'd always been with the Richardsons. "Perfect," I said, taking a seat directly across from where Howard would sit. "I've also brought the quarterly review materials." Howard mentioned wanting to discuss his daughter's trust fund allocation. Martin's jaw tightened. He hadn't known about that. It had been a conversation between Howard and me last week, outside the formal client communication channels. Before he could respond, the conference room door opened again, and Howard Richardson entered. 62, silver-haired, radiating the confident energy of someone who'd built a technology manufacturing company from the ground up. "Richard, Martin, good to see you both," he boomed, shaking hands vigorously before turning to Aiden with slightly less enthusiasm. "And you must be Adam, the new analyst Martin mentioned." "Aiden Davis," he corrected with a professional smile. "Associate Portfolio Manager. Pleasure to meet you, Mr. Richardson." "Howard, please," Richardson said, taking the seat directly across from me. "So, gentlemen, what insights do you have for me today? The markets seem even more unpredictable than usual." Martin smoothly took control, launching into a polished overview of current market conditions and Westfield's positioning strategy. I watched Howard carefully as Martin spoke, noting how his attention wandered slightly during technical discussions, how he perked up at mentions of specific industry developments relevant to his business background. These were patterns I'd observed over 7 years of working with him. Information that wasn't in any CRM system or client file. Knowledge that made me valuable. When Martin finally paused, gesturing for Aiden to continue with a more detailed sector analysis, I caught Howard's eye. "Before we dive deeper," I said, "I wanted to address your question about the biotech quantitative fund. I've analyzed their approach against your risk tolerance parameters." I slid a concise one-page summary across the table, something I'd prepared weeks ago, anticipating Howard's interest based on previous conversations. The format was exactly what I knew he preferred. Key points bulleted, potential downsides clearly stated, my recommendation direct and unambiguous. Howard picked it up, scanning it with practiced efficiency. "This is exactly what I needed, Richard. Clear as always." He turned to Martin. "This is why I value Richard so much. He knows I don't need 50 pages of analysis. Just the essentials and the bottom line." Martin nodded tightly. Our entire team strives for that kind of clarity. Indeed, Howard said. Now, what about Caroline's trust fund? Richard mentioned some potential adjustments given her graduate school plans. For the next 45 minutes, the meeting proceeded in this vein. Martin and Aidan presenting broader strategies, me interjecting with specific insights tailored to Howard's particular situation and preferences. A careful observer would have noticed the subtle power struggle unfolding. Martin attempting to position Aidan as a primary resource, me leveraging years of relationship building to maintain my centrality. Howard, for his part, seemed oblivious to the undercurrents, responding most warmly to my contributions, but engaging politely with everyone. As the meeting concluded, Howard shook hands all around, then paused. Richard, walk me out. Want to ask you something about Caroline's art acquisition idea. Of course, I replied, carefully not looking at Martin's face. In the elevator, Howard's friendly demeanor continued. Caroline's becoming quite the collector. Wondering if we should create a separate entity for her purchases. Tax implications, you know. Potentially valuable depending on her long-term intentions, I said. I can outline some options if you'd like. Always appreciate your thoroughness, he said as we reached the lobby. Then surprising me. Everything all right with the team up there? Seemed a bit of tension. My heart skipped. Howard was more perceptive than I'd given him credit for. Just the usual dynamics when bringing new talent into established client relationships, I said carefully. Aidan has excellent credentials. Howard studied me for a moment. I've worked with you for 7 years, Richard. Trust your judgment completely. Just so we're clear, you're still my primary advisor, correct? Not planning to hand me off to the young gun? The question presented a crucial ethical crossroads. I could reassure him falsely, knowing Martin's plans. I could hint at the truth without revealing it. Or I could be transparent about a situation I wasn't supposed to know about myself. Howard, I said slowly, I value our relationship enormously. As long as I have any say in the matter, I'll continue working with you directly. Technically true, if carefully worded. Howard nodded, apparently satisfied. Good. No offense to the others, but I prefer working with someone who remembers the 2008 crisis firsthand, not someone who studied it in business school. We shook hands again, and I watched him walk to his waiting town car, my mind racing with implications. Howard had just handed me critical information. He valued our relationship specifically, not just Westfield services, and he preferred experienced advisors over younger ones, the exact opposite of what Martin was basing his transition strategy on. I returned to the office to find a terse email from Martin. My office. 2 p.m. The confrontation was coming. I'd forced his hand, and now we would have our reckoning, just not in the way he'd planned it. I spent the intervening hours methodically documenting the Richardson meeting while the details were fresh, adding Howard's comments about preferring experienced advisors to my growing file of evidence. I also made discreet calls to 2 other major clients, ostensibly checking in on recent market movements, but really testing their reactions, seeing if they shared Howard's preference for continuity over youth. Both expressed similar sentiments. Neither had any idea they were on a transition list. By the time I walked into Martin's office at precisely 2 p.m., I felt oddly calm, like a chess player who has seen several moves ahead and knows the game is already decided, even if his opponent hasn't realized it yet. Martin was standing behind his desk, arms crossed. Close the door. I did so, then took a seat without being invited. Small power moves in a game that had suddenly become much larger. What the hell was that this morning? Martin demanded without preamble. A client meeting, I replied mildly. One that went quite well, I thought. You weren't supposed to be there. Strange. Howard seemed to think otherwise. Called me specifically with questions before the meeting. Martin's jaw tightened. You put me in an impossible position. Did I? Seemed to me I was just doing my job, serving a client I've worked with for 7 years. Richard, Martin leaned forward, his tone shifting to something more conciliatory. We need to have a difficult conversation that I'd planned for next quarter, but your behavior is forcing the issue. You mean the conversation about transitioning my clients to younger advisors? About how I'm on a list for systematic removal from relationships I've built over years? About how the board supports refreshing the client-facing team? The color drained from Martin's face. How did you... Does it matter? I interrupted. What matters is that instead of having an honest conversation with me, a founding partner who helped build this firm, you chose to go behind my back. To dismantle my client relationship secretly while smiling to my face? Martin recovered quickly, his expression hardening. Business decisions aren't personal, Richard. The industry is changing. Clients want advisors who understand emerging technologies, new investment vehicles. Interesting theory. Not what Howard Richardson just told me. His exact words were that he prefers working with someone who remembers the 2008 crisis firsthand, not someone who studied it in business school. Martin waved this away. One client's opinion, our market research shows, your market research shows what you want it to show. I cut in. Just like those performance reviews you've been subtly downgrading over the past year, creating a paper trail to justify decisions already made, he didn't deny it. The firm needs to evolve, Richard. Everyone reaches a point where what? Where 15 years of loyalty means nothing. Where relationships I've built and nurtured become corporate assets to be reassigned based on birth date? Martin sighed, adopting the patient tone he used with difficult clients. Your contributions have been valuable, Richard. No one's denying that. But the advisory business is changing. Clients increasingly want digital interfaces, automated solutions, advisors who speak the language of blockchain and AI. We have to position Westfield for the future, not the past. There it was, plain as day. Not about performance or capability, but about age, about perception. And you couldn't have had this conversation directly? Professional courtesy after 15 years? Martin at least had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable. The transition plan needed to be carefully implemented. Abrupt changes can spook clients, so instead you created a secret list, started reassigning relationships behind my back. All while I continued bringing in revenue and serving clients who trust me. I leaned forward. That's not business, Martin. That's cowardice. His expression hardened. Careful, Richard. This conversation isn't helping your position. My position? I laughed, genuinely amused by his assumption that I was trying to save my job. Martin, I read that email. I know exactly what my position is. The question is whether you understand yours. What's that supposed to mean? I stood slowly. It means I just came from a meeting with a client who specifically values my experience and has no interest in being handed off to someone half my age. A client who represents 18 million in assets, if I recall your email correctly. A client who would be very interested to know he's on a transition list without his knowledge or consent. Martin's face flushed. Are you threatening me? Because if you're suggesting you'd violate client confidentiality or your fiduciary duty, I'm suggesting nothing of the sort, I interrupted calmly. I'm merely pointing out that your strategy is based on a flawed premise. Some clients, many clients, value experience. Trust relationships built over years. See age as an asset, not a liability. Martin studied me, recalculating. What do you want, Richard? A longer transition timeline? A consulting arrangement? Enhanced severance? The question revealed how completely he misunderstood what was happening. He still thought this was a negotiation, that I was angling for better terms in my inevitable exit. I want what I've earned. I said simply, respect, honesty, the opportunity to continue serving clients who value my expertise. And if the firm has made a different decision, then the firm will face the consequences of that decision. We stared at each other for a long moment, the office silent except for the faint hum of the ventilation system. 15 years of professional history stretched between us. Deals closed, crises weathered, celebrations shared, all reduced to this sterile standoff. I think we both need to consider next steps carefully. Martin finally said, take the rest of the week off, Richard. With pay, of course. Let's reconvene Monday when emotions aren't running so high. A strategic retreat. He needed time to consult with legal, to accelerate contingency plans, to shore up client relationships he now realized might be at risk. I'll take tomorrow. I conceded. But I'll be in for the Petrosky meeting Friday. They're expecting me. He could have argued, but clearly decided against further confrontation. Fine. Friday for Petrosky, then Monday for our follow-up. I nodded and turned to leave, pausing at the door. One more thing, Martin. I've known you for 15 years, worked alongside you through market crashes and personal crises. I thought that meant something. Business evolves, Richard. We all have to adapt. Yes, I agreed quietly. We certainly do. I walked out without looking back, straight to my office where I gathered my personal items. Not everything, just enough for a few days' work from home. As I packed my briefcase, Sandra appeared in the doorway, her expression stricken. Richard, I am so sorry about the email. I didn't realize. I held up a hand to stop her. You did me a favor, Sandra. Better to know the truth, however it comes. Are you leaving? Taking a couple of days off. I'll be back Friday for Petrosky. She nodded uncertainly. Can I do anything? I considered this. Sandra had been my assistant for a decade, knew my systems, my clients, my preferences. Her mistaken email had revealed the truth, but her loyalties would ultimately lie with her continued employment. Still, there were ways she could help without compromising herself. Actually, yes. Could you send me the updated contact information for the Sullivan account? And make sure the Petrosky materials include the alternative investment scenario we discussed last month. Simple, reasonable requests that wouldn't raise flags, but would give me crucial information I might need later. Of course, right away. Thank you, Sandra, for everything. The weight in those words must have registered because tears sprang to her eyes. It's not right what they're doing. Few things are in this business, I said gently. But we all make our choices. I left the building feeling strangely light, as if a burden had been lifted. The confrontation with Martin had clarified everything. There would be no compromise, no negotiated exit, no gentle transition. This was war, just one where only I knew the full battlefield. I called Michael Chen from the car. How'd it go? He asked immediately. I showed up at the Richardson meeting, forced Martin's hand. We just had it out in his office. Michael let out a low whistle. Full nuclear option. I'm impressed. What's the fallout? He's given me tomorrow off to consider next steps. Wants to reconvene Monday. Meanwhile, he'll be circling the wagons, getting legal involved, possibly accelerating client transitions. So what's your play? I pulled into a parking garage, mind racing through scenarios and contingencies. I need to move faster than they expect. Start the groundwork for the new firm immediately. And I need to understand exactly what client relationships I can ethically maintain despite the non-compete. Come to my office, Michael said. I'll clear my afternoon. We'll get my legal team involved. They handled my separation from Westfield. Are you sure? This puts you in a difficult position with Martin. Michael laughed. Martin made his position regarding me perfectly clear when I left 5 years ago. I'm not concerned about burning bridges that are already ash. His tone turned serious. But Richard, you need to be absolutely certain this is what you want. Once you start down this road, I'm certain, I said, surprising myself with the conviction in my voice. Martin made his choice. Now I'm making mine. 2 hours later, I sat in Michael's sleek downtown office, surrounded by his legal team and a business formation specialist. The picture they painted was sobering but not insurmountable. Your non-compete is fairly standard for Westfield, said Elena Patel, Michael's primary counsel. 1-year prohibition on providing similar services within a 100-mile radius. 2 years on soliciting Westfield clients directly. But there are exceptions, added Thomas Barrett, her associate. The non-solicitation doesn't apply if clients approach you independently. And the non-compete has exceptions for clients with whom you had a pre-existing relationship before joining Westfield. I nodded slowly. So legally, I can't ask Westfield clients to follow me. But if they hear I've started my own firm and reach out. Exactly, Elena confirmed. You can inform people of your new venture. You can announce your departure from Westfield. You just can't directly solicit Westfield clients to transfer their business. Which means, Michael interjected, the key is timing and messaging. How clients learn about your departure and new firm will determine everything. And I'll need proper infrastructure in place before any of that happens, I added. Office space, compliance systems, custodial relationships. All doable with the right team and capital, Michael assured me. The question is whether you have the resources to launch without immediate client revenue, given the non-compete constraints. This was the part I'd been contemplating since that first night. I've been conservative with my Westfield earnings. Have about $800,000 in liquid assets plus retirement accounts. House is nearly paid off. Emily has her own income from the gallery. Enough to bootstrap if you're careful, Michael observed. Especially if you run lean at first. And there's the settlement question, Elena added. Given what you've described, there's a potential age discrimination claim against Westfield. We might leverage that for a separation package that could provide additional startup capital. The conversation continued for another 3 hours, dissecting options, outlining timelines, identifying potential pitfalls. By the time we finished, my notebook was filled with action items, and a framework for the new firm was taking shape. Remember, Michael cautioned as we wrapped up, Martin isn't stupid. Once he realizes what you're planning, he'll use every resource at his disposal to protect Westfield's client relationships. Legal threats, financial incentives, reputation management. I'm counting on it, I replied. Martin's predictable when threatened. He'll overreact, make it personal, focus on punishing perceived disloyalty rather than adapting to protect client relationships. You sound like you've thought this through. I've had 15 years to observe how Martin handles challenges to his authority. I close my notebook. His biggest weakness has always been his ego. He'll see this as a betrayal rather than a business decision. Exactly how he framed my situation to me. Michael smiled slowly. You know, I always thought you were too nice for this business, Richard. Too ethical, too concerned with doing the right thing. I still am, I said, standing to leave. I'm just applying those ethics in a different direction now. By the time I arrived home that evening, the initial shock and hurt of Martin's betrayal had transformed into something colder, more focused. This wasn't just about saving my career or exacting revenge, though both motivations simmered beneath the surface. This was about proving a point, showing Martin and myself exactly what decades of experience was worth in an industry that increasingly worshipped youth over wisdom. Emily was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for dinner, when I entered. She looked up, studying my face. Something's happening, she said, not a question. I set down my briefcase and nodded. I need to tell you something, and I need your complete honesty about how you feel about it. She set down the knife. That sounds serious. It is. We moved to the living room, where I finally told her everything. The email, the transition list, the confrontation with Martin, and most importantly, my emerging plan to start my own firm. Emily listened without interrupting, her expression shifting from shock to anger to thoughtful calculation. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. So they're pushing you out because you're in your 50s, she finally said, after 15 years of building their business. That's the essence of it, yes. And instead of taking a settlement and retiring early, you want to compete against them, potentially take their clients. Not all their clients, I clarified. Just the ones who value what I provide. Experience, relationship continuity, personalized service. The ones who value you for exactly the qualities Martin is dismissing, she observed sharply. Yes, Emily stood and paced the living room slowly. It's risky, Richard. Starting a business at this stage of life. Using our savings. Potentially facing legal battles. I know. We could just take whatever settlement they offer. Downsize. Travel. You've worked hard for decades. I'd considered this option, of course. The path of least resistance. Take what Westfield offered, sign the NDA, fade quietly into early retirement. Is that what you think I should do? I asked carefully. She stopped pacing and turned to face me, her expression suddenly fierce. Hell no. Those bastards need to learn you don't discard people like they're obsolete technology. I just wanted to make sure you'd considered the easy option before rejecting it. Relief flooded through me. So you support this? Support you starting your own firm to show Martin exactly what he's throwing away? Absolutely. She sat beside me, taking my hand. I've watched you build Westfield's business for 15 years, Richard. I've seen how clients trust you, depend on you, how much you care about their financial well-being. If Martin can't see that value, then he deserves to lose every client who follows you. Her certainty steadied me, crystallizing my resolve. It won't be easy. The first year especially will be challenging financially and emotionally. When has anything worthwhile ever been easy? She countered. Besides, the gallery is doing well. We can tighten our belts while you build. We talked late into the night, mapping out practical considerations. The home office would need upgrading. Our vacation plans would be postponed. Emily's income from the art gallery would become our primary financial support while the new firm established itself. As we finally prepared for bed, Emily paused. What will you call it? Your new firm? I hadn't gotten that far in my planning, focused as I'd been on legal and operational concerns. I don't know, I admitted. Something that communicates stability, experience, trustworthiness. Caldwell Financial Partners, she suggested. Your name has value, Richard. Don't hide it behind some generic corporate branding. Caldwell Financial, I tested the sound of it. Simple, direct. Just like you, she smiled. The anti-Westfield. That night, I slept soundly for the first time since discovering Martin's betrayal. The path ahead was challenging, uncertain, potentially treacherous. But it was a path of my choosing, not one dictated by Martin's dismissal of my value. I would build something new, something that celebrated the very quality Westfield now saw as a liability. Experience. And in doing so, I would deliver the most devastating response possible to Martin's betrayal. I would succeed. Morning brought renewed clarity and purpose. With my unexpected day off, I had a critical head start. Time to begin laying groundwork while Westfield still believed I was simply processing the inevitable end of my career there. I started with research using my home office to investigate compliance requirements, technology platforms, custodial options, and office space availabilities. Michael had connected me with several vendors who specialized in supporting breakaway financial advisors, an entire industry built around professionals in exactly my situation. By noon, I had scheduled meetings with 3 potential office spaces, initiated paperwork for business formation, and begun cataloging the technology needs for a lean but effective firm launch. The practical tasks helped channel my emotional energy, transforming anger into productive momentum. At 2 p.m., I received a text from Michael. Lunch tomorrow? Have promising custodial option to discuss. I confirmed, then spent another hour reviewing my employment contract with Westfield, paying particular attention to the client communication restrictions during a separation. The language was restrictive, but not airtight. Enough ambiguity to work with if approached carefully. At 4:30, my phone rang. Howard Richardson. Richard, he said when I answered. Got a minute? Always for you, Howard. What's on your mind? Bit of an odd situation. Got a call from Martin this afternoon, suggesting we schedule our next quarterly review with Aiden taking the lead. Said you'd be transitioning to more of an internal role, focusing on investment committee work rather than client relationships. His tone made it clear what he thought of this arrangement. Wanted to hear directly from you what's happening over there. My heart raced. Martin was moving faster than anticipated, already beginning to actively transition clients. I had to be extremely careful with my response, legally, ethically, and strategically. Howard, I appreciate you reaching out directly, I said, choosing my words with precision. The firm is making some structural changes to client service models. Martin and I have different perspectives on the best approach for long-standing relationships like yours. That's diplomatic, Howard snorted. Let me be blunt. Are you being pushed out? My role at Westfield is evolving, I said carefully. These processes can be complicated. What I can tell you with complete certainty is that I remain committed to providing you the same level of service and expertise you've come to expect, regardless of my specific position. A deliberate non-answer that violated no agreements while hinting at the truth. I see, Howard said thoughtfully. Well, I told Martin I'm not interested in changing advisors. Informed him quite directly that my relationship is with you, not with Westfield's logo. This was dangerous territory. I appreciate your loyalty, Howard. Martin is looking at what he believes is best for the firm's future. And what about your future, Richard? Because if Westfield is foolish enough to sideline someone with your experience in client relationships, I imagine other firms would be interested. The opening was clear, but I couldn't take it, not while still employed by Westfield. My focus right now is ensuring clients like you continue receiving the service you deserve, Howard. My own arrangements are secondary. Howard paused. Well, keep me posted on developments. And Richard, if your situation changes professionally, I'd appreciate knowing about it. Directly from you. I understand, I said. And Howard? Thank you. After hanging up, I sat motionless, processing the implications. Martin was accelerating client transitions, but at least one major client was pushing back. This created both opportunity and risk. Howard's loyalty was valuable, but his direct questioning of Martin would likely accelerate whatever contingency plans Westfield had for managing my departure. The timeline was compressing. I needed to move faster. I called Michael immediately. Martin's already starting client transitions. Howard Richardson just called me after getting a call from Martin trying to introduce Aiden as his new primary contact. That's aggressive, Michael replied, earlier than I would have expected. How did Richardson respond? Pushed back. Told Martin he wants to continue working with me. Perfect. Did you say anything that could be construed as solicitation? Absolutely not. Kept it vague and focused on service continuity. Good, but this changes things. Martin's moving faster than we anticipated, which means we need to accelerate our timeline. Michael paused. I think we need to get you out of there before Monday's meeting. The longer you stay, the more clients Martin will attempt to transition, and the more restricted your communications will become once you give notice. I'm supposed to handle the Petrosky meeting tomorrow. Even better. Do the meeting, then deliver your resignation letter afterward. That gives you one more client contact within Westfield's structure, plus a clean break before the weekend. The suggestion made strategic sense, but the emotional reality of it, actually resigning from the firm I'd helped build, hit me with unexpected force. That's fast. It needs to be, Michael insisted. Every day you remain at Westfield after Martin started client transitions is a day they solidify their narrative and relationship transfers. We need to get you legally separated so you can begin appropriate communications about your new venture. He was right, of course. The longer I stayed, the more Martin would secure client relationships and restrict my options. I'll draft a resignation letter tonight. Have Elena review it first thing tomorrow. We need it precisely worded to protect your rights while fulfilling your obligations. After we hung up, I went to find Emily in her home office, where she was cataloging pieces for an upcoming exhibition. Things are accelerating, I told her, explaining Howard's call and the new timeline. She set down her catalog. You're resigning tomorrow? Yes. After the Petrosky meeting, Emily nodded slowly. Sooner than we expected. How do you feel? Terrified, I admitted. Exhilarated, angry, determined. Take your pick. She crossed the room and embraced me. All normal. This is a big leap, Richard. But you're not jumping without a parachute. You have a plan, you have support, and most importantly, you have decades of experience that no one can take away from you. Her confidence steadied me, as it had countless times throughout our marriage. There's so much to do. Office space, compliance setup, technology infrastructure, custodial arrangements. One step at a time, she advised. Tonight, write your resignation letter. Tomorrow, deliver it with dignity. The rest will follow. When did you become so wise about financial services entrepreneurship? I teased, grateful for her pragmatic support. I've been married to you for 26 years. She reminded me, I've absorbed more about this business than either of us realized. She squeezed my hand. Now let's draft that letter. It needs to be perfect, professional, dignified, and subtly devastating. Together, we crafted a resignation that fulfilled all employment obligations while maintaining my dignity. No accusations, no recriminations. Just a clear statement that after careful consideration, I had decided to pursue other professional opportunities. Effective immediately following the Petrosky meeting. I emailed it to Elena for legal review, then spent the evening finalizing my list of personal items to collect from the office and reviewing the Petrosky materials for tomorrow's meeting. My last official act at Westfield would be serving a client impeccably, a fitting symbolic end to 15 years of dedication. What will you say to Martin when you deliver the letter? Emily asked as we prepared for bed. As little as possible, I replied. The letter will speak for itself. Besides, anything I say can and will be used against me later. Will you say goodbye to anyone else? Sandra or other colleagues? I'd been pondering this question myself. Briefly to Sandra. She deserves that much after 10 years. A few others, perhaps, but quick and professional. No dramatic farewells. Emily nodded. And tomorrow night? Tomorrow night we open that bottle of Barolo we've been saving and begin the next chapter. Sleep came fitfully that night, my mind racing with logistics and contingencies. I woke before dawn, reviewing mental checklists as I dressed with particular care. My best suit, Emily's father's cufflinks, the subtle confidence of someone prepared to reshape their professional identity. Elena's approved version of the resignation letter arrived at 7 a.m., with minor modifications to protect my legal position. I printed 2 copies, one for Martin, one for HR, and placed them in my briefcase alongside the Petrosky materials. Ready? Emily asked as I prepared to leave. As I'll ever be, I replied, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. She straightened my tie, a gesture from countless mornings over decades together. Give them hell, she whispered, quietly, professionally, and with absolute precision. The drive to Westfield's offices felt surreal, the familiar route now laden with finality. I parked in my usual spot, nodded to the same security guard, rode the same elevator. Everything identical to thousands of previous mornings, yet fundamentally different. Sandra looked up in surprise as I approached her desk. Richard, didn't expect you today. Martin said you were taking time off. Just came in for the Petrosky meeting. I explained. They're expecting me. She nodded, relief evident in her expression. They're all set up in conference room A. Coffee's already there. Thank you, Sandra. I hesitated, then added, for everything over the years. Something in my tone made her look up sharply. Richard? We'll talk later. I promised, then continued to the conference room where the Petroskys, father and son, were already seated with Martin. Martin's surprise at seeing me was poorly concealed. Richard, didn't realize you were coming in today. The Petroskys are my clients, I said simply. I told you I'd be here for this meeting. Before he could respond, James Petrosky rose to shake my hand. Richard, excellent timing. We were just discussing the succession planning options for the family business. For the next hour, I conducted the meeting exactly as I would have any other day. Thorough, attentive, focused entirely on the client's needs. Martin watched with careful neutrality, occasionally contributing, but largely allowing me to lead the discussion. Whether this was strategic restraint or professional courtesy, I couldn't tell. When the meeting concluded successfully with clear next steps established, I walked the Petroskys to the elevator, accepting James's hearty handshake and his son Michael's respectful nod. We'll have those revised trust documents for review next week, I promised as the elevator doors closed. Documents I would never prepare, a meeting I would never attend. The realization brought a momentary pang that I quickly suppressed. This wasn't about abandoning clients. It was about serving them in a new capacity, one where my experience was valued rather than discounted. I returned to my office, gathered the few personal items I'd planned to collect, and placed them in my briefcase alongside the resignation letters. Then I walked directly to Martin's office. He was on the phone but waved me in, wrapping up his call quickly. Richard, good work with the Petroskys. I think we've stabilized that relationship effectively. We have, I agreed, which makes this the appropriate time for this. I placed the resignation letter on his desk. Martin stared at it for a moment before picking it up, his expression shifting from confusion to comprehension as he scanned the contents. Effective immediately? He said, looking up. This is abrupt. Is it? I thought it aligned perfectly with your transition timeline. Just accelerating the inevitable. Martin set the letter down carefully. Where are you going? To pursue other opportunities, I replied, echoing the letter's language. Which firm made you an offer? Carson Wealth? Fisher Investments? I allowed myself a small smile. No offers, Martin. Just possibilities. His eyes narrowed with sudden suspicion. You're starting your own firm. I neither confirmed nor denied, maintaining professional neutrality. My resignation letter fulfills all notification requirements. I've completed the Petrosky meeting as promised. My personal items are already packed. Martin stood slowly. You understand that your employment agreement contains strict non-compete and non-solicitation provisions? I'm familiar with my contractual obligations, I said calmly, and I intend to honor them completely. If you think you can take Westfield clients, I think clients make their own decisions about who they trust with their financial futures. I interrupted. Just as you've made your decisions about the future of Westfield, I extended my hand. 15 years is a long time, Martin. I wish you and the firm continued success. He hesitated before briefly shaking my hand. This isn't how I wanted this to end, Richard. Yes, it is, I corrected him gently. Just not on this timeline or these terms. I turned to leave, pausing at the door. I've left a copy with HR. They'll need it to process my final compensation and benefits. Martin nodded stiffly. We'll need an exit interview. Policy requirements? Have HR contact me directly to schedule it. With that, I walked out of Martin's office for the final time. As I passed Sandra's desk, her expression told me she'd already heard. News traveled at light speed in financial firms. Richard, is it true? Yes. Today is my last day. Her eyes widened. But the clients, the Richardsons, the Petroskys, what should I tell them when they call? Tell them the truth, Sandra, that I've resigned to pursue other opportunities. I smiled gently. And thank you for everything. You've been extraordinary to work with. Tears welled in her eyes. This isn't right what they're doing. Sometimes the wrong decisions create the right opportunities, I said. Take care of yourself, Sandra. I continued through the office, exchanging brief farewells with a few colleagues who realized what was happening. Most seemed shocked, a few understanding, none particularly surprised once they processed the information. Word of my confrontation with Martin had clearly circulated. The elevator ride to the lobby felt like descending into a new reality. 15 years of professional identity stripped away in a single morning. Yet alongside the disorientation was a curious lightness, the unburdening that comes with decisive action after prolonged uncertainty. In the lobby, I did something I'd never done on a workday. I turned off my work phone, physically separating myself from Westfield's electronic ecosystem. My personal phone immediately rang. Michael Chen. Is it done? He asked without preamble. Yes. Letter delivered. Personal items collected. I'm walking to my car now. Perfect. Come directly to my office. We have the custodial services representative waiting, and the compliance team is ready to begin paperwork. As I drove away from Westfield's building, I caught myself automatically checking the rearview mirror, as if expecting to see the past 15 years following behind me. Instead, I saw only the normal flow of traffic, the world continuing unchanged despite the seismic shift in my professional life. It was simultaneously terrifying and exhilarating. This abrupt severance from the institutional identity that had defined me for so long. I was no longer Richard Caldwell, partner at Westfield Financial Partners. I was simply Richard Caldwell, financial advisor, a distinction that contained both loss and possibility. By the time I reached Michael's office, the initial adrenaline was giving way to focused determination. This wasn't an ending, it was a beginning, one that would require all my experience, all my relationship skills, and all my strategic thinking to navigate successfully. Martin had dismissed me as too old for Westfield's future. I would show him and everyone else exactly what that experience was worth. The real work was just beginning. The next morning began a surreal new chapter. For 15 years, I'd risen at 5:30 a.m., checked overnight market movements in Asia before my first cup of coffee, and mentally prepared for client calls while showering. Now, with no immediate client obligations, the familiar rhythm was disrupted. I still woke at 5:30, habits that ingrained don't disappear overnight, but instead of market updates, I reviewed commercial lease agreements Michael had sent last night. My home office, once sufficient for occasional weekend work, would now serve as Caldwell Financial's headquarters until proper space was secured. Emily had already helped rearrange the furniture, creating a more professional backdrop for video calls. The antique desk that had been my father's now centered the room, symbolizing the bridge between experience and new beginnings. "What's on the agenda today?" Emily asked, bringing coffee as I reviewed compliance documentation requirements. "Everything," I sighed. "Finalizing the LLC formation, submitting registration paperwork to the State Securities Division, reviewing technology platforms, interviewing potential administrative support." She set the coffee down, squeezing my shoulder. "One thing at a time. That's how empires are built," I replied, covering her hand with mine. One foundation stone after another. The morning passed in a blur of administrative tasks, the unglamorous but essential scaffolding of a new financial advisory practice. By noon, I had scheduled meetings with 3 potential administrative assistants, selected a cloud-based client management system, and completed the initial paperwork for registering Caldwell Financial as an RIA, Registered Investment Advisor. My phone buzzed with a text from Michael. "Heard anything?" "Nothing yet," I replied. Radio silence from Westfield wasn't surprising. Martin would be coordinating with legal, developing a client retention strategy, and crafting the official narrative about my departure. The institutional machine was grinding into action, preparing to protect itself from a potential threat. At 2:13 p.m., the expected email arrived from Westfield's HR department. From Melanie Johnston, Human Resources Director. Subject: exit procedures and obligations reminder. Mr. Caldwell, following your resignation effective yesterday, this correspondence serves as a formal reminder of your continuing obligations to Westfield Financial Partners as outlined in your employment agreement. 1. Non-compete provision. For 12 months following termination, you may not provide similar financial advisory services within a 100-mile radius of any Westfield office location. 2. Non-solicitation provision. For 24 months following termination, you may not directly or indirectly solicit any Westfield clients with whom you had contact during your employment. Parendewats. Mundram. Confidentiality obligations. All client information, strategic plans, and proprietary methodologies remain Westfield's confidential information and may not be used or disclosed. Return of property. All company property, including electronic devices, files, and documents, must be returned within 48 hours. Please confirm receipt of this notice and your understanding of these continuing obligations. Our records indicate you have returned your company laptop and mobile device, but please ensure any remaining company property is returned promptly. We will be conducting an exit interview as per company policy. Please contact me to schedule this at your earliest convenience. Regards, Melanie Johnston, Human Resources Director, Westfield Financial Partners. I forwarded the email to Elena Patel, Michael's legal counsel, who was now representing me. Her response came within 20 minutes. Standard template. Nothing unexpected. Schedule the exit interview. Be professional, forthcoming on procedural matters, and non-committal about future plans. Remind them that while you're respecting all obligations, clients have the right to work with advisors of their choosing. We'll prepare talking points. The notification chime on my personal email interrupted my thoughts. A message from a name that made my heart race. From Howard Richardson. Subject, your departure from Westfield. Richard, I received a call from Martin this morning informing me of your departure to pursue other opportunities. He assured me that Aiden Davis would ensure a seamless transition of my accounts. When I asked directly about your plans, he stated he wasn't at liberty to discuss your personal decisions. Given our conversation earlier this week, I suspect there's more to this story. If you're at liberty to discuss your situation, I'd appreciate hearing directly from you. My family has trusted you with our financial well-being for 7 years, and that relationship means something to me regardless of which firm employs you. Please call at your convenience. Howard Richardson. The email represented exactly the scenario Martin feared most. Clients viewing their relationship with me as primary, with Westfield merely the institutional backdrop. Howard's message presented both opportunity and danger. Responding inappropriately could violate my non-solicitation agreement, but ignoring a direct client inquiry would be both unprofessional and strategically unwise. I called Elena immediately. I've received an email from Howard Richardson asking about my departure. How do I respond without violating the non-solicitation provision? This is important precedent, she said. Forward me the email. I'll draft a response template that acknowledges the inquiry without crossing any lines. The key is responding to his questions without actively encouraging him to transfer his business. Her template arrived 30 minutes later. Howard, thank you for your message. Yes, I have indeed left Westfield Financial Partners to pursue a new professional chapter. I greatly value the relationship we've built over the years and appreciate your reaching out. While I'm excited about my future plans, I'm mindful of my professional obligations to Westfield. I am unable to directly solicit any transfers of business. However, I'm always available to discuss general financial matters or to simply catch up as colleagues who have worked together for many years. If you have specific questions about your Westfield accounts, Martin or Aiden would be the appropriate contacts going forward. Best regards, Richard. Carefully worded to acknowledge the facts without crossing any legal lines. I sent it immediately, knowing Howard would read between the lines. The chess game had begun. By evening, I'd received similar inquiries from 3 other major clients, each receiving variations of the same carefully crafted response. The seeds were being planted, though I couldn't actively water them, at least not directly. How many reached out? Emily asked over dinner. 4 so far. Combined assets of about 35 million. Is that good? For day one? I smiled. It's exceptional. These are people who noticed my absence immediately and cared enough to reach out personally. The kind of clients who value relationship over institution. Martin must be furious, undoubtedly calling emergency meetings, crafting retention strategies, perhaps even considering legal warnings to me, even though I've done nothing actionable. Emily refilled our wine glasses. To making Martin very, very nervous, we clinked glasses. Just the beginning, I promised. The next morning, Saturday, brought an unexpected development. My personal cell phone rang at 8:17 a.m. Sandra from Westfield. Richard, I hope it's okay that I called. I used the personal number from the Christmas card list. Of course, Sandra. What can I do for you? She hesitated. This isn't official. I could get in trouble, but I thought you should know. Martin called an all-hands meeting yesterday afternoon after you left, announced your departure, said you'd had a difference in vision with the firm's direction. Accurate, if incomplete, I commented. He introduced a formal client retention protocol. Every client you manage is being assigned to transition teams. Aiden for the high net worth clients, others distributed among 3 other advisors. They're scheduling immediate outreach calls, offering fee discounts, enhancement services. This was valuable intelligence, confirmation that Martin was implementing an aggressive retention strategy. Thank you for telling me, Sandra. I appreciate the risk you're taking. There's more, she continued, lowering her voice. They've retained outside counsel specializing in financial services, employment disputes. Overheard Martin telling Melanie from HR to document everything in case they need to enforce Richard's obligations aggressively. My jaw tightened. Legal intimidation, classic Martin. The thing is, Sandra continued, clients are already calling, asking about you. The Petroskis called yesterday afternoon. The Wilsons this morning, even though it's Saturday. Martin's told us to say you've moved on to explore other opportunities and to immediately pivot to introducing their new advisor. And how are clients responding? She laughed softly. Not well. Mr. Wilson asked if you'd been fired for cause. When I said no, he asked for your contact information, which I couldn't provide. He then said, and I quote, "Then I'll find him myself." Richard managed my money through 2 divorces. Some 20-something with an MBA isn't stepping in without my approval. The warmth that spread through my chest wasn't just vindication. It was confirmation of something I'd believed, but couldn't prove until now. Clients valued relationship continuity and experience over institutional brands, especially in wealth management. Thank you, Sandra. This information is helpful, though I'd never want you to jeopardize your position. Richard, I've worked with you for 10 years. What they're doing isn't right. I can't do much, but I can at least let you know what's happening. After we hung up, I immediately called Michael and Elena, relaying the intelligence without revealing Sandra as the source. They're moving faster than expected on client retention, Michael observed. Standard protocol would give existing clients at least a week to process the transition before aggressive retention tactics. Martin feels threatened, Elena concluded, which confirms what we suspected. He knows how valuable your client relationships are and recognizes the potential vulnerability. So what's our next move? I asked. Acceleration, Michael replied. We need your firm fully operational faster than planned. How quickly can you secure office space? I've narrowed it to 2 options. Could sign a lease Monday. Do it, he urged. Get business cards printed immediately, even if the rest of the branding isn't finalized. Have the phone lines and website operational by Wednesday. We need to create a legitimate business entity that clients can find when they go looking, which they clearly are already doing. The weekend passed in a blur of activity. Emily helped me finalize the Caldwell Financial logo and website design. I selected office space in a prestigious building 15 blocks from Westfield, close enough for client convenience, but respectfully distant. Michael connected me with a compliance consultant who specialized in expedited RIA registrations. By Sunday evening, my home office walls were covered with sticky notes. Client information I could ethically retain, names, publicly available contact information, marketing strategy considerations, technology implementation timelines, and compliance requirements. The foundation of Caldwell Financial was taking shape, constructed from decades of experience and newly ignited determination. Monday morning brought my scheduled exit interview with Westfield's HR director, conducted via video call. I projected calm professionalism, answering questions about handover processes without revealing my accelerated timeline for launching Caldwell Financial. When asked directly about my future plans, I kept my response vague but truthful. I'm exploring several professional options, Melanie. After 15 years in one firm, I'm taking time to consider the best path forward. Martin mentioned concerns about client communication protocols. She said carefully, given your significant client relationships, we want to ensure a smooth transition that respects your continuing obligations to Westfield. Translation, they were worried I would poach clients. I understand my obligations completely, I assured her. I've responded to client inquiries factually without solicitation, and I'll continue to maintain that professional boundary. The conversation ended with practiced corporate pleasantries that did nothing to disguise the underlying tension. Westfield was preparing for battle, even if they couldn't yet see the battlefield I was arranging. Immediately following the exit interview, I signed the lease on 1,800 square feet of Class A office space with a spectacular view of the river. The 2-year lease term reflected a calculated risk. If Caldwell Financial succeeded as I envisioned, we'd outgrow the space. If it failed, I'd be personally liable for significant ongoing costs. The weight of this commitment settled on my shoulders as I signed the paperwork, a tangible reminder that revenge carried its own price tag. The office would need furnishing, technology infrastructure, and the countless small elements that transform empty space into a professional environment. Emily, ever practical, had already created a prioritized list of necessities versus aesthetics that could wait. Conference room table, your desk, client chairs, basic reception area first, she said as we toured the empty space that afternoon. Art, decorative elements, and anything non-essential can come later as cash flow stabilizes. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the city where I'd built my career. Somewhere in that landscape of steel and glass, Martin was mobilizing Westfield's considerable resources to retain clients and neutralize the threat I represented. The thought should have been intimidating. A solo practitioner against an established firm with dozens of employees and substantial financial resources. Instead, I felt a surprising calm. David versus Goliath, perhaps. But this David had intimate knowledge of Goliath's vulnerabilities. What are you thinking? Emily asked, joining me at the window. That we need to be operational by next Monday. Phones, computers, client meeting capability, everything essential to managing client relationships. She raised an eyebrow. That's ambitious. Necessity, not ambition. Martin's accelerating his client retention strategy. We need to be ready when clients come looking. When, not if? I smiled. When? The calls and emails are already happening. Once Caldwell Financial exists as more than just paperwork, once there's a physical location, a website, a structure clients can see and touch, the trickle will become a stream. Tuesday morning, I awoke to another email from Howard Richardson. Richard, thank you for your response. I understand the professional constraints you're navigating. Reading between the lines, I suspect you're establishing your own advisory practice, though you can't directly say so. I had a rather unsatisfactory meeting with Aiden yesterday. Bright young man, certainly, but unfamiliar with the specific family dynamics that inform our financial planning. Started explaining concepts to me that you and I had already worked through years ago. When you're at liberty to discuss your future plans more specifically, I'd appreciate a conversation. Regards, Howard. I forwarded the message to Elena with a simple question. How do I respond? Her guidance came quickly. Acknowledge receipt. Express appreciation for his understanding. Note that you'll be in touch when you can share more details. Nothing more specific. I crafted the response carefully and sent it, then turned my attention to the day's priorities. The office build-out was progressing, furniture being delivered, technology infrastructure being installed, compliance procedures being documented. Michael had connected me with a talented operations manager named Rebecca Taylor, who had experience setting up RIA firms. Her efficiency was remarkable. What might have taken weeks was happening in days. By Wednesday afternoon, Caldwell Financial had a functional office, complete with meeting spaces, secure technology systems, and the essential infrastructure for managing client relationships. The website went live, simple but professional, emphasizing experience, personalized service, and relationship continuity. My new business cards arrived, their weight in my hand representing the tangible reality of this new venture. At 4:18 p.m., my phone rang, a number I didn't recognize. Richard Caldwell speaking. Richard, it's Patricia Lebowitz. Patricia and her husband controlled a family foundation with approximately $12 million in assets. Clients I'd served at Westfield for nearly a decade. Patricia, how are you? Confused and somewhat annoyed, she replied with characteristic directness. I received a call from Martin introducing me to someone named Kylie, who's supposedly taking over our accounts. When I asked about you, he gave a corporate non-answer about organizational transitions. I chose my words carefully. I've left Westfield to pursue a new professional chapter, Patricia. It was a difficult decision after 15 years. Are you starting your own firm? She asked bluntly. This was the critical moment, the line between responding to a direct question and actively soliciting business. Elena had provided clear guidance for exactly this scenario. Yes, I am establishing an independent advisory practice, I answered truthfully. However, I want to be transparent that I have continuing professional obligations to Westfield that prevent me from directly soliciting their clients. You're not soliciting, Patricia declared. I'm asking, what's the name of your new firm and when will you be operational? Again, a direct question deserved a truthful answer, provided without elaboration that could be construed as solicitation. Caldwell Financial. We're in the final stages of setup now. Good. Martin tried to tell me this Kylie person has been working closely with you on our accounts. I've never heard her name before yesterday. The misrepresentation didn't surprise me. Martin was clearly deploying every retention tactic available, including fabricating transition continuity that didn't exist. I can't comment on Westfield's internal processes, Patricia. No need. I've already told Martin we'll be evaluating our options. Now I have the information I need to do that properly. After we disconnected, I immediately documented the conversation and emailed the summary to Elena, evidence that I was responding to client inquiries without active solicitation. The distinction was crucial to maintaining ethical and legal compliance while still allowing clients to make informed choices. The pattern repeated throughout the week. Clients calling after receiving transition notifications from Westfield, asking direct questions that I answered factually without elaboration. By Friday, 8 significant clients had initiated contact, collectively representing over $60 million in assets under management, nearly a third of my client portfolio at Westfield. Not all conversations were positive. Two clients expressed disappointment, but indicated they would remain with Westfield for continuity. One was clearly testing the waters, uncertain about following an advisor to a new, unproven firm. The emotional roller coaster of these interactions, from validation to rejection, required careful management of my expectations. Building a new firm would not happen overnight, regardless of how many clients expressed initial interest. Friday evening, as Emily and I celebrated the completion of the office setup with takeout dinner amid the newly arranged furniture, my phone rang again. James Petrosky. Richard, hope I'm not interrupting your evening. Not at all, James. What can I do for you? Well, I've had two rather aggressive meetings with Martin and someone named Aiden this week. They're offering fee discounts, enhanced reporting, even tickets to a charity gala next month. I remained silent, letting him continue without prompting. The thing is, none of that addresses my actual concern, that the advisor who's managed our family's assets for 12 years is suddenly gone. My son Michael asked some direct questions about your departure that clearly made Martin uncomfortable. He paused. We've decided to place Westfield on a formal review status. We'll be evaluating alternative advisory relationships over the next 30 days. I'd like to include your new firm in that evaluation, assuming that's permissible within whatever constraints you're operating under. This was significant. The Petrosky relationship represented nearly $30 million in assets, one of the largest client relationships I'd managed at Westfield. I would be happy to participate in your evaluation process, James. I can provide information about Caldwell Financial's approach and capabilities without any obligation. Excellent. Michael suggested we meet at your new offices next Wednesday. That would give us a chance to see your setup and discuss how you'd approach our situation as an independent advisor. After confirming the meeting details, I sat in stunned silence for several moments. Good news? Emily asked. The Petroskys want to meet next week. They've put Westfield on formal review status. Her eyes widened. That's significant, isn't it? They're one of your largest clients. Were, I corrected. Westfield's clients now. But yes, extremely significant. They're essentially creating a formal selection process that allows them to evaluate Caldwell Financial alongside Westfield without any appearance of improper solicitation on my part. Smart of them. James Petrosky didn't build a manufacturing empire by being naive about business relationships. He's creating a documented process that protects everyone involved. I poured us both another glass of wine. This is happening, Emily. Faster than I anticipated, but exactly as I hoped. Clients are making their own decisions about who they trust with their financial futures. And choosing the advisor with experience over the glossy brochure, she added, raising her glass. To clients who recognize value when they see it. Saturday morning, I was reviewing the Petrosky family's complex trust structures in preparation for Wednesday's meeting, when my personal email chimed with a notification that made my blood run cold. From Martin Westfield. Subject, cease and desist, client solicitation. Richard, it has come to our attention that you have engaged in direct solicitation of Westfield Financial Partners clients in violation of your employment agreement. Specifically, we have documented communication with the Richardson, Lebowitz, and Wilson accounts that constitutes improper solicitation under Section 7.2 of your agreement. This serves as formal notice to immediately cease all direct and indirect solicitation of Westfield clients. Failure to comply will result in immediate legal action to enforce the terms of your agreement, including injunctive relief and damages. Additionally, we remind you that use of any client information, strategic methodologies, or proprietary approaches developed during your employment constitutes misappropriation of trade secrets and will be treated accordingly. We expect your written confirmation of compliance with these obligations within 24 hours. Martin Westfield, Managing Partner. Westfield Financial Partners. I immediately forwarded the email to Elena with urgent in the subject line. Her response came within 15 minutes, followed by a phone call. This is exactly what we anticipated, she said calmly. Martin's feeling the pressure from client inquiries and deploying the standard intimidation response. The good news is that based on the documentation you provided of your client interactions, his claims are without merit. So how do we respond? Firmly but professionally. We'll send a response that documents the actual nature of your client communications, responding to inquiries rather than soliciting. We'll remind Westfield that clients have the absolute right to receive information and make their own decisions about financial advisors. She paused. Most importantly, we'll make it clear that any legal action will require disclosure of Westfield's actual client transition practices, including Martin's documented strategy of transitioning your clients based on age considerations rather than performance. You think that will back him down? Martin doesn't want this in court any more than you do, Richard. Legal battles are expensive, time-consuming, and create public records. He's hoping the threat alone will be sufficient to intimidate you. Her response was exactly what I needed. Calm, strategic, focused on facts rather than emotion. By Sunday afternoon, Elena had crafted a response that systematically addressed each of Martin's allegations, while subtly highlighting the risks Westfield would face in pursuing legal action. The message was clear. I understood my obligations and was complying with them fully, but I would not be intimidated by baseless threats. The response was sent Sunday evening, timing calculated to ensure Martin would see it first thing Monday morning, a small psychological advantage in what was becoming a high-stakes game of corporate chess. Monday arrived with no immediate counter from Martin, which Elena assured me was a positive sign. If he had a strong case, you'd have heard from Westfield's attorneys by now, she explained. Radio silence suggests they're reassessing. The week unfolded with methodical purpose. Caldwell Financial was now fully operational. Phones answered professionally, meeting spaces ready for client discussions, compliance procedures documented and implemented. I had contracted with a paraplanner to support technical analysis and a client service associate to manage administrative functions. The skeleton of a legitimate financial advisory firm now existed where only an idea had been 3 weeks earlier. On Wednesday morning, I arrived at the office early to prepare for the Petrosky meeting. The conference room was arranged precisely. Water bottles placed, presentation materials organized, technology tested. Every detail communicated stability, professionalism, and continuity, critical messages for clients considering a transition to a new firm. James and Michael Petrosky arrived precisely at 10 a.m., both visibly curious about the new space. Impressive for a 3-week-old firm, James commented, taking in the river view. You've been busy. When you have the right vision, implementation can happen quickly. I replied, gesturing them to seats at the conference table. For the next 90 minutes, we engaged in a thorough discussion of their family's financial situation, my approach as an independent advisor, and the transition process should they decide to move their accounts. I was careful to present factual information without pressuring. This was their evaluation process, not my sales pitch. The main difference you'd experience at Caldwell Financial, I explained, is direct access to the decision maker. No corporate layers, no institutional mandates that might not align with your specific needs. Just relationship-based advisory services focused entirely on your family's goals. Michael, the more analytical of the two, asked pointed questions about technology platforms, reporting capabilities, and security protocols, all of which I was prepared to address in detail. James focused more on relationship continuity and fee structures, comparing what Westfield had recently offered against my approach. As the meeting concluded, James leaned back in his chair. Well, Richard, this has been illuminating. We have one more meeting scheduled with another firm next week, then we'll make our decision. I appreciate being included in your evaluation process. I responded. Whatever you decide, I respect your thoughtful approach. After they left, I allowed myself a moment of cautious optimism. The meeting had gone exceptionally well, with the Petroskys clearly taking this evaluation seriously. While nothing was guaranteed, their engaged questions and Michael's detailed notes suggested genuine consideration rather than mere courtesy. The afternoon brought another significant development, an email from Howard Richardson. Richard, after careful consideration and additional discussions with Westfield that failed to address my concerns, I have decided to transition my family's accounts to your new firm, assuming you're able to accept new clients at this time. Please advise on next steps when convenient. Regards, Howard. The first confirmed client transition, a psychological milestone that validated the risk I'd taken in establishing Caldwell Financial. Howard's accounts alone wouldn't sustain the firm, but his decision represented proof of concept. Clients valued relationship continuity and experienced advisory services enough to follow their advisor through the disruption of a transition. I responded with a carefully worded email outlining the process, attaching the necessary paperwork while emphasizing that the decision remained entirely his. Elena reviewed the communication before I sent it, ensuring compliance with my continuing obligations to Westfield. By Friday, 3 additional clients had made similar decisions, initiating paperwork to transfer their accounts to Caldwell Financial. Each transition followed the same pattern. Client-initiated inquiries, factual responses from me, independent decisions made without pressure or solicitation. The documentation of each interaction was meticulously maintained, creating an audit trail that would withstand scrutiny if Martin escalated his legal threats. The weekend brought unexpected news from Sandra, who called Saturday morning from a personal number. "Richard, Martin's called an emergency board meeting for Monday," she said, her voice hushed despite being away from the office. "The agenda includes client retention crisis and legal enforcement options. He's apparently furious about the Richardsons deciding to leave." "How did you learn this?" "I was asked to prepare the board materials." "The numbers are stark, Richard. 8 client relationships representing over $70 million in assets have initiated transfer paperwork. 6 more have requested meetings with Martin to discuss their options." While I had known about the confirmed transfers, the additional 6 potential transitions were news and significant. Together, they represented nearly half of the client relationships I had managed at Westfield. "There's more," Sandra continued. "Martin's bringing in outside counsel specializing in emergency injunctions, lawyers who focus on stopping financial advisors from serving former clients. I overheard him telling the litigation partner they need to make an example of you." My stomach tightened. "Thank you for the warning, Sandra. Please be careful. I'd never want you to jeopardize your position." "Actually, about that," she hesitated. "I've been thinking, if you're building a new firm, you might need experienced administrative support. Someone who knows your systems, your client preferences, your work style." The implication was clear. "Are you suggesting what I think you are?" 15 years at Westfield is enough for me too, Richard. If you have a place for me at Caldwell Financial, I'd like to be considered." The offer was tempting, but complicated. Sandra wasn't bound by the same non-compete restrictions that I was, but hiring her would undoubtedly escalate tensions with Martin. Yet her knowledge of client relationships and administrative processes would be invaluable during this critical growth phase. "Let me think about the timing," I said carefully. "There's definitely a role for you here, but we need to approach this thoughtfully given the current situation." After we disconnected, I immediately called Elena to discuss both Martin's apparent legal escalation and the potential of hiring Sandra. "The threatened injunction is concerning, but not unexpected," Elena said. "We should prepare a response strategy immediately. As for Sandra, there's no legal prohibition against hiring her, but the optics are problematic given the current tensions. I'd suggest waiting at least 30 days to create separation between the events." The warning about Martin's legal strategy cast a shadow over what had otherwise been a week of significant progress. An injunction, even if ultimately unsuccessful, could create devastating disruption during the critical early weeks of Caldwell Financial's operation. Clients in transition would face uncertainty, potentially reconsidering their decisions. The mere existence of legal proceedings could create perception issues with prospective clients. I shared the developments with Emily over dinner that evening, watching her expression shift from concern to determination. "So Martin's response to losing clients is to try to legally prevent you from serving them, rather than improving Westfield's offering?" she asked incredulously. "Essentially, yes. It's actually a telling response, focusing on controlling clients rather than earning their loyalty." "What does Elena suggest?" "Preparation for emergency response if an injunction is filed, documentation of all client-initiated contacts, possibly accelerating client transitions before any legal action can take effect." Emily considered this. "The clients who've already decided to follow you, they've made that choice independently, correct? Documented their decisions?" "Yes, completely unprompted by me. We have clear records showing they initiated the process." "Then Martin's legal attack is really against them, not you," she observed shrewdly. "He's essentially telling clients they don't have the right to choose their own financial advisor." Her framing clarified something I hadn't fully articulated. This wasn't just about my right to establish a competing firm. It was about clients' rights to make independent decisions about who managed their assets. Framed this way, Martin's legal strategy seemed not just vindictive, but potentially self-defeating. "You're right," I said slowly, "and that perspective might be our strongest defense, not just legally, but in the court of client opinion." Sunday was spent preparing for what might come Monday, reviewing documentation with Elena, creating contingency communication plans for clients in various stages of transition, and mentally preparing for the possibility of legal confrontation. The strain was evident. What had begun as righteous indignation at Martin's betrayal was evolving into something more complex, a test of endurance, strategy, and conviction. Monday morning arrived with tense anticipation. I was in the office by 7 a.m., reviewing client paperwork, and preparing for 2 scheduled meetings with prospective clients who had requested information about Caldwell Financial. By noon, no legal notice had arrived, though Elena had stationed a process server monitor at her office to provide immediate notification if any action was filed. At 2:43 p.m., my phone rang. James Petrosky. Richard, I wanted to let you know our decision before you hear it elsewhere. We've completed our evaluation process and will be transitioning our accounts to Caldwell Financial, effective immediately. The paperwork is being finalized this afternoon. Relief and validation flooded through me. Thank you, James. I'm honored by your confidence and look forward to continuing our work together. There's something else you should know, he added. Martin called me directly this morning, offering an additional fee reduction and hinting at potential problems with your new operation. When I asked directly if he was suggesting you weren't capable of managing our assets after 15 years of demonstrated success, he backpedaled rather awkwardly. The attempt at undermining my reputation was unsurprising but disappointing. I appreciate your directness with him, James. Loyalty matters in business relationships, Richard. Not blind institutional loyalty, but the kind earned through years of demonstrated integrity. Martin seems to have forgotten that fundamental principle. After we disconnected, I sat in momentary silence, processing the significance of this development. The Petrosky relationship, one of Westfield's largest and most prestigious, had chosen Caldwell Financial despite Martin's direct intervention. The victory wasn't just financial but deeply symbolic. Experience and relationship continuity had prevailed over institutional pressure. The afternoon passed without legal action from Westfield, though Elena cautioned that timing could be strategic, filing late in the day to create maximum disruption. By 5 p.m., with no service of process, we began to cautiously hope that Martin had reconsidered the injunction strategy. At 6:17 p.m., an email arrived that changed everything. From Martin Westfield. Subject, proposed resolution. Richard, after consultation with our board and legal counsel, I am writing to propose a resolution to our current situation that may better serve all parties' interests than protracted legal confrontation. Westfield Financial Partners is prepared to offer the following terms. 1. Mutual release. Westfield will waive enforcement of certain non-compete provisions in exchange for mutual releases of all claims. 2. Client transition framework. We propose an organized framework for client transitions where clients have expressed clear preference for continuing their relationship with you. This would include proper documentation and orderly transfer of relevant materials. Financial consideration. In recognition of your contributions to Westfield and to facilitate this resolution, we propose a one-time payment of $175,000. Surina 1. Non-Gavadu. Confidentiality. All parties would maintain confidentiality regarding the terms of this agreement. This approach would allow clients to exercise their preferences while providing a structured process that protects all parties' interests. It would also avoid the costs and uncertainties of litigation. Please consult with your counsel and advise if this approach merits further discussion. We would request a response within 48 hours. Regards, Martin Westfield, Managing Partner, Westfield Financial Partners. I forwarded the email to Elena immediately, then called her to discuss the implications. This is a significant development, she said after reviewing Martin's proposal. He's essentially offering to waive portions of the non-compete in exchange for a clean, documented transition process. Why the sudden change in approach? I asked. Just days ago, he was threatening injunctions. 2 likely explanations, Elena replied. First, their counsel probably advised that an injunction would be difficult to obtain and potentially harmful to client relationships. Second, the client feedback may have been more negative than anticipated when they learned Westfield was attempting to legally prevent them from working with their chosen advisor. The financial offer seems low given the client relationships at stake. I observed, it's a starting point for negotiation, not a final offer. But more importantly, the real value here isn't the money. It's the removal of legal obstacles to serving clients who want to work with you. So you think we should pursue this? I think we should counter with terms that better protect your interests while accepting the basic framework. A negotiated resolution is almost always preferable to litigation, especially for a new business that needs to focus on growth rather than legal battles. After further discussion, Elena drafted a counter-proposal that accepted the concept of a structured transition framework while modifying specific terms, increasing the financial consideration to $250,000, clarifying which clients would be eligible for transition, and specifying the ongoing obligations of both parties. The next morning, I reviewed the counterproposal one final time before authorizing Elena to send it. The document represented something I hadn't anticipated when this journey began. Not just revenge against Martin, but a negotiated resolution that acknowledged the reality of client preferences. There was a surprising maturity to this approach that contrasted with the raw anger that had initially fueled my actions. Martin's response came late that afternoon: agreement in principle with our counterterms, with minor modifications to the financial consideration, $225,000, and transition timeline. Elena advised that the offer was reasonable and represented a significant victory given where we had started. You've achieved the essential goal, she noted: the ability to serve clients who choose to work with you without the distraction and expense of legal battles. The financial settlement is secondary but represents appropriate recognition of the value you built at Westfield. With my authorization, Elena finalized the agreement terms. By Thursday afternoon, both parties had signed the documents, officially establishing a structured framework for client transitions and removing the legal cloud that had threatened Caldwell Financial's early growth. That evening, Emily opened a bottle of champagne, her eyes bright with pride. To victory without destruction, she toasted, more elegant than revenge. Is that what this is? I wondered aloud. Victory? What would you call it? I considered the question carefully. Evolution, perhaps. When this started, I wanted Martin to suffer, to feel the pain of losing what he valued, just as he'd made me feel expendable. But somewhere along the way, it became less about hurting Westfield and more about building something that truly reflected my values. And clients recognized that authenticity, Emily observed. They chose the advisor who valued experience and relationship continuity, exactly what Martin dismissed. The structured transition process began immediately, with formal notifications to clients who had expressed interest in following me to Caldwell Financial. Within 2 weeks, 11 major client relationships representing over $120 million in assets had formally transferred, with 3 more in process. The transition occurred without the drama or controversy that might have accompanied litigation, allowing all parties to maintain professional dignity. By the 1-month anniversary of Caldwell Financial's founding, the firm had established a stable client base, implemented robust operational systems, and begun generating sufficient revenue to cover essential expenses. The $225,000 settlement from Westfield provided additional security during the growth phase, though I chose to reinvest most of it in business development rather than personal compensation. Sandra joined the firm after the 30-day waiting period Elena had recommended, bringing invaluable institutional knowledge and client familiarity that accelerated relationship transitions. Her presence provided both practical support and emotional continuity, a familiar face for clients making the change from Westfield to Caldwell Financial. The 3-month mark brought a chance encounter I had both anticipated and dreaded. While attending a charity function benefiting the local symphony, an event Emily and I had supported for years, I found myself face-to-face with Martin at the cocktail reception. A momentary silence hung between us, heavy with unspoken history. Richard, he finally nodded, his expression carefully neutral. Martin, I replied with equal restraint. Your new venture appears to be progressing well. It is, thank you. I paused, then added, the transition framework has been beneficial for all parties. He nodded again, swirling his scotch thoughtfully. The board questioned my judgment on that decision initially, wanted to pursue the injunction strategy. What changed their minds? Client feedback, primarily. When the Petroskis and Richardsons both indicated they would reconsider all their financial relationships if their advisor choice was legally challenged, he shrugged. The potential collateral damage became unacceptable. The acknowledgement was as close to vindication as I was likely to receive. Martin would never admit that his strategy of dismissing experience had backfired, but the results spoke for themselves. Well, he said after another moment, I should rejoin my table. As he turned to leave, I found myself saying, Martin. He paused. For what it's worth, I believe there's room in this industry for different approaches. Firms that emphasize youth and technological innovation, and those that value experience and relationship continuity. A flicker of something, recognition perhaps, crossed his features. Perhaps, he conceded, though I suspect neither approach succeeds without elements of the other. It wasn't reconciliation exactly, but it was an acknowledgement of mutual reality, a professional detente that allowed both of us to move forward without lingering animosity. As Martin walked away, Emily appeared at my side, having watched the exchange from a distance. That looks surprisingly civilized, she observed. Almost philosophical, I agreed. The difference between revenge and resolution, perhaps. And which did you achieve? I considered the question as we made our way back to our table. Both in different ways. Martin lost what he valued, prestigious client relationships, just as he'd planned to discard me. But in the end, the resolution created something more valuable than revenge would have. Caldwell Financial, she said with evident pride. More than that, I replied. Validation of a principle. Proof that experience isn't a liability. It's an asset that clients truly value. Martin's mistake wasn't personal, it was philosophical. He misunderstood what clients actually want from their financial advisors. 6 months after my abrupt departure from Westfield, Caldwell Financial had established itself as a boutique advisory firm specializing in high-net-worth clients who valued experienced guidance and relationship continuity. We had secured office space, hired essential staff, and implemented systems that combined traditional relationship management with appropriate technological innovation. Most significantly, we had attracted 15 major client relationships, representing over $175 million in assets under management, a portfolio that generated sufficient revenue to ensure the firm's viability while allowing for measured growth. The client relationships weren't just financial assets, they were validation of the core principle that had driven this journey. Experience matters. The transition hadn't been without challenges. 2 clients who initially transferred ultimately returned to Westfield, finding the institutional structure more aligned with their needs. Several prospective clients hesitated at the perceived risk of a newer firm despite my established track record. The operational demands of building a business from scratch proved more exhausting than I had anticipated, particularly in the early months. Yet these challenges were overshadowed by unexpected rewards. The freedom to structure client relationships without institutional constraints, the ability to implement ideas without committee approval, the satisfaction of building something that truly reflected my professional values. The deep gratitude expressed by clients who followed me to Caldwell Financial confirmed that relationship continuity mattered more than institutional brands for many investors. On a personal level, the journey had transformed me in ways I hadn't anticipated. The angry, betrayed advisor who had walked out of Westfield 6 months earlier had evolved into something more complex, still motivated by a desire to prove Martin wrong, perhaps, but also genuinely focused on building something meaningful and sustainable. Emily noticed the change one evening as we celebrated signing our newest client, a referral from Howard Richardson. "You're different now," she observed as we sat on our patio watching the sunset. "When this started, you were fueled by anger, by the need to show Martin he was wrong about you. And now? Now you're building something because you believe in it, not just to prove someone else wrong." The motivation has shifted from external validation to internal purpose. She was right, as she so often was, about matters of emotional truth. What had begun as revenge, a desire to hurt Martin by taking what he valued, had evolved into something more meaningful, the creation of a firm that embodied principles I genuinely believed in. Principles that clients, through their choices, had validated. Martin had called me too old for Westfield's future. In doing so, he had inadvertently freed me to create a future better aligned with my values, one where experience was celebrated rather than discarded, where relationship continuity was prioritized over institutional branding, where client preferences drove business decisions rather than arbitrary age considerations. My phone buzzed with a text from Howard Richardson. "Just referred the Carmichael family your way. Similar situation to ours. Looking for experience and stability in their advisory relationship. $14 million portfolio. Told them you were the perfect fit." I smiled, showing the message to Emily. "The perfect revenge," she said softly. "Success on your own terms. Not revenge," I corrected. Resolution. The distinction mattered. Revenge would have left me emotionally tethered to Martin and Westfield, perpetually measuring my success against their failure. Resolution had allowed me to move forward, to build something valuable without requiring someone else's destruction. As darkness settled over the garden, I reflected on the journey of these past 6 months, from the shocking discovery of Martin's transition list to the creation of a thriving independent advisory firm. The path had been neither straight nor easy, but it had led to a destination I might never have reached without Martin's betrayal. In dismissing me as too old, Martin had forced me to prove not just to him, but to myself exactly what decades of experience were worth in an industry increasingly fixated on youth. The answer, it turned out, was evident in the clients who had chosen to follow me, in the referrals they now provided, in the sustainable business that had emerged from what had initially seemed like professional catastrophe. What are you thinking about? Emily asked, noticing my contemplative silence. That sometimes being underestimated is the greatest advantage, I replied. Martin thought I was too old to be valuable, too set in my ways to build something new, too cautious to take risks. And instead, those very qualities, experience, established relationships, measured risk assessment, became the foundation for Caldwell Financial's success. The lesson wasn't just for Martin, I realized. It was for the entire industry that increasingly valued youth over wisdom, technological gloss over relationship depth. Some clients might prefer that approach, and firms like Westfield would serve them well. But others, many others as it turned out, valued the steady guidance that only came with decades of experience navigating market cycles, economic shifts, and life transitions. There was room for both approaches in this industry. Martin's mistake wasn't in pursuing innovation, it was in assuming that experience had no place in the financial future he envisioned. The clients who had chosen Caldwell Financial had delivered a clear verdict on that assumption. To being too old, Emily said, raising her glass with a smile, and all the valuable perspective that comes with it. I clinked my glass against hers, feeling a sense of completion that transcended the initial desire for revenge. To new beginnings built on established foundations. As the stars emerged above us, I felt a peace that had eluded me since reading that fateful email 6 months earlier. Martin had tried to write me off as obsolete, but in doing so, he had catalyzed the most rewarding chapter of my professional life. One where experience wasn't just tolerated, but celebrated. One where being too old had proven to be exactly old enough to know what truly mattered. The firm I had built wasn't just a vehicle for revenge. It was the embodiment of a philosophy that in wealth management, as in life, wisdom earned through experience remains an irreplaceable asset. And the clients who had chosen to follow me to Caldwell Financial had affirmed that principle through the most meaningful vote possible, entrusting their financial futures to an advisor who had been dismissed as too old, but had proven to be exactly what they needed.